welcome to another edition of Joe's Rod Shop podcast. It's great to have everyone back on the show. Okay, first, I know I've only done one this week. I've got a lot of guys lined up. I'm busy doing a lot of interviews at the moment, so I can start rolling them out a little bit faster. But at the moment, as they're coming in, I'm getting them out. Unfortunately, like you guys know, I've got a magazine and a TV show and everything I work on at the same time. And I've got some other world domination plans I'm working on at the same going on as well. But hey, what else can we do? Back to the show. Just remember, please go like and subscribe. Go leave a comment. Tell us who you want me to talk to. Give us some feedback. If you guys have anybody interesting you'd love to get onto the show, you want me to talk to and get their story out, please do. I'd love to hear from them. Love to get more guys in. So today's show, I spoke to Gareth Crossley from Crossley and Webb. Now, I've done some work with him in the years, and for the guys who don't know who Crossley and Webb is, they have probably one of the most beautiful showrooms in Cape Town you have ever seen in your life. Some of the most fantastic cars, Ferrari, supercars, you name it, classics, everything. There's a lot of great cars sitting there. I've got some friends whose cars are there. Michelle, I need to get hold of you. We need to talk Porsches. So, unfortunately, I had to cut this one short because I had another interview, or I had another meeting just after it's scheduled. But I could have spoken to Gareth for like hours. So, because this conversation just turned, and Gareth starts talking about the first race in South Africa, the first ever official car race in South Africa, which is absolutely insane. So yeah, all I want to say is, further ado, let's hear from Gareth Crossley. Gareth Crossley, welcome to the show, man. So great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Let me just turn down the sound on my side a little bit. So that's much better. All right. How's things been on your side? How's business and stuff going?
Considering the circumstances, it's not too bad. Guys were still buying or trying to buy during lockdown level 5. Mm-hmm. So once we were able to trade, we've done some good deals. The market is still quite active at the high end. There's still some speculative buying. There's a lot of stock coming onto the market as well. So it's a mixture of the guys wanting to liquidate assets, but there is an uptake from the other more liquid client base to take up those assets. So yeah, if we work hard and push, it's doable. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing, I mean, when the whole COVID thing hit, I mean, I was dealing with the classiccars.com in the US and stuff. And I was talking to some of the auction houses in the US as well. And they all expected, like you said, that there was going to be an enormous amount of cars hitting the market, not a lot of guys buying. And it turned out it was the other way around. It was more guys looking to purchase things than that was for sale. It was just, how can I put it? We were talking about the mental state where guys are looking for better, different investments. Obviously, property and stuff, took a massive dip with lockdown. So guys are looking at the classic car industry and stuff as an area of purchasing, classics and that type of stuff. And I think there's a lot of guys that just sat home and went, you know what? It's time I buy that car. I've always wanted it. Life is obviously very short, yeah. So that's what I want to do. But before we get into the technical stuff, I wanted to talk to you about Crossley and Webb and how that all came to be. Because from my side, from a spectator perspective, I was living in Cape Town, and all of a sudden, this showroom opens in Cape Town, which was something like we have never seen before. I mean, the level of cars that you guys were offering. I mean, we were used to like the Ashleys and the investment cars, the Joburg and all this type of stuff. But you guys just came with this completely different concept of the storing with the cars and the level of cars and it was just like all of a sudden you guys elevated the whole industry by launching. How did all of that come together?
Well, it came from a space of identifying a need. And at the time, I was the national sales manager at Ferrari, and I was getting tired of only selling one brand, and specifically one, and only the new cars for that brand. There was a focus to move cars from factory. That was the main incentive. And I've always been a lot more eclectic. And at the time, Brian Webb was one of my favorite clients, and we developed French for the sale of cars, but we saw a gap where at Ferrari, cars were just lying around in the workshop, ever cars, but the fact that free storage, or they sit in the ownership experience of the cars, and pressures became for them to sell the cars. So in terms of, if people remember the old Viglietti, there was a coffee bar as you came in. It was quite a social experience, there in Roland Street, and we wanted to take certain aspects of being engineered out of that experience. So a coffee bar was a key aspect. Storage, of not only Ferraris but classics, providing a platform for people, or a support base for people to enjoy collector cars, sports cars, supercars. And that's really the mindset that we came into the venture with, was as a support base. So it's really working in those gaps, but also it was an amalgamation of two different worlds. I was always interested in classics and collector cars, but I was very much more focused on Ferraris, supercars, and dealing with those clients. But I felt the Cape Town buyer was a lot more eclectic than what we were catering to. So somebody would want look at a collector with 10 cars. He would want a Ferrari, and at that time we were selling Maserati as well. But he'd want a classic Porsche, and then he'd like a hot rod, and then he'd like a custom Land Rover, and Rolls-Royce convertible. So there are various parts of the motoring experience that we weren't catering to in my previous life. And that's been the great thing about Crossley and Webb. I mean, we've learned so much. I mean, Brian was more the classic car collector, at the time. And, from my client base and supercar Ferrari background, I've definitely gravitated more now to the classic collector car side. So yeah, it's also, having a partner like Crazy to kind of invest was brilliant. But we didn't really plan. We just knew what we wanted to achieve. And,
the result what you guys thought? I mean, did the market take on to I mean, I've got a few friends whose cars and stuff there with Michelle and everybody who you guys were storing her cars and everything. Did you guys get the response in the market that you thought, or were you guys amazed by the response that actually came through from that level? Because you guys became an institution immediately. You weren't just this, you became this place that every car guy in South Africa just had to go see,
You see, the way it was, you could do stuff like this, and various other people have tried to do it, but it came from a place where, I've learned a lot at Ferrari. I was brand manager, national sales manager, and the way that they deal with transferred into how we built the Crossley and Webb brand. And we had franchise motor industry levels of service, experience, branding, brand building events that we carried over to an independent space. And that's the parallel that I think created a lot of success for us. A client that dealt with me at he would have a consistent experience to how he's dealt with at Crossley and Webb. It wouldn't be a case where, okay, well, now he's dealing in the classic car industry in South Africa and he's got to take a step down in terms of his service. So the consistent service level, is very important. But, looking after that whole circle of needs of the client has been a big part of our success. So a client would first be maybe a storage client, and then we do an inspection on the car and we see, okay, well, it needs this, this, and this. So while it's in storage, we've got a concierge service where, a guy can order parts. We've got a parts guy, but we deal now with freelancers and the best of different worlds. We don't try and do everything ourselves. We try to do, I must say, in the first 2 years.
That bites you very quickly. Like you said, rather go find the experts in the industry that works on that specific car instead of trying to figure out how to do everything yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how have you guys, from there to now, I mean, you've had a direct view of how the car industry's changed, or the classic car industry's changed. Has it changed a lot over the years? I mean, I know at one stage the European cars fell down, the American cars started picking up again. I mean, they increased in value very quickly. And then all of a sudden the British cars are out again. I mean, how have you seen over the years how the market's changed?
Look, I think the reason why the collector market is doing quite well in a period like COVID is because we learned what collector cars did in 08, 09. It was a safe haven as an alternative investment. And if we look at what the value of cars did through that period, it actually created a lot of confidence from people that this area or these assets are actually be good investments. So now we're looking at 10 years, 12 years later, and there's cars in the market. Definitely when we started Crossley and Webb in 2013, 2014, the classic market was gaining confidence. People that never heard of collector cars increasing in value started to buy collector cars, but there was also a lot of speculative buying. And I think with brands like Porsches, especially classic Porsches, it got a bit hot, and they've definitely peaked 2 years ago and have started to drop. But it doesn't mean they're not bad investment. They're bad investments now. It just means they're lower than where they were 2 years ago. But now we're in a market where other forms of investments are performing poorly. Now they're looking at cars again, and cars or mobile assets that are valued intentionally. When the rand doesn't increase value, your increases in value. So there's that floating mechanism, and it's mobile. But we don't want the cars to leave South Africa, but people want to know if something had to leave or if they had to realize money, it could be sent out. So those dynamics in this car market are creating a lot of positive activity for us.
But that, you were saying you don't want the cars to leave the country, but that just means that we are playing in a more international market, at the moment. If you take cars like Ferrari, the high items, the F40s and all this type of stuff. I mean, there was only small numbers of them made. You're expecting cars like that to move borders quite often, because someone explained to me the one day, the world is there's more millionaires than there ever has been, but it doesn't mean that there's more F40s that there was. And every guy who's made money wants a F40, or he wants, a Countach, or he wants one of his dream cars that he had on his wall. And he wants one of those, but the numbers are still very low from what are available. So the demand for those cars are actually growing more than anything else. which is why the values are still pushing up. Because I mean, we keep, if we look at like Barrett Jackson and this type of stuff, and you see the levels at what some of the classic cars are going for at the moment. But once again, it's an international market. That person purchasing the car at Barrett Jackson can be South Africa, and that car can be moving to South Africa now. The boundaries are gone. Sorry.
Yeah. You see, the problem is we still got to push for parity. You know, if you look at the import between the main countries in the collector car markets, you know, between Europe and the States, it's minimal import duties, where South Africa has got far higher, 4 times, 5 times higher duties to get those cars in, and ad valorem. Obviously, VAT is not really an issue because you've got the VAT on that side, but the ad valorem aspects, on older cars, there is now the rebate to get the excise duty back, I think, older than 1970, but nobody's really through that process. I think everybody's too, am I going to get my money back if I paid the duty? You know, so unless there's a proper parity between international countries, if we export on every sale, we've got a huge dilution in the collector car base or stock base in South Africa. That's the problem for some of the really special cars, you know, to get it back in, you know, versus the price that it went out at. You know, in some cases, you've got to double the purchase price again to supply the same buyer that sent it out.
Exactly. But that's why South African cars are just great for picking for the classic collectors all over the world. Our cars, a lot of people still don't know what they're sitting with. And they're cheap. They're cheap and easy to get out more than anything else. And like I said, it's so much harder to try and get a car back into the country than anything else. But I mean, we're sitting with the same issues with in the aftermarket with importing of parts and stuff. It's import duties that keeps killing us everywhere more than anything else. So it's pushing. Yeah. So it's more expensive to build or to restore a car and so. Or okay, let me rephrase that. The parts coming in is more expensive, but the labor stuff is still great. We still have some of the best car build, a lot of great car builders in the country, especially car restorers in the country.
Yeah.
I've found out now, over the last 2 years, there's also a huge increase of classic cars coming to South Africa for restoration as well.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. That's a part I never thought I would see in the industry, that you know, our Porsche specialists and that type of stuff sitting in South Africa of that quality, that guys are flying or sending cars from all over the world for restoration on this side.
No, that is definitely happening. Yeah. But the problem is the duties, the incentives for that industry. You know, that the industry is very fragmented. You know, I think where South Africans in this market don't do themselves favors is they don't really work together. You know, so and even for myself to learn about what somebody's doing in, you know, Johannesburg or in Port Elizabeth or wherever, you know, sometimes it's always a surprise when I find out the kind of projects that are being built here.
Well, it's the South African mentality of it's mine. It's mine. Can't tell anybody. They're scared they're going to take everyone's going to take it away from me or know it, which is crazy. I mean, the more if the market worked together more, especially in the classic car market, if the guys work together with finding out what's out there and how to build it. I mean, I had a friend who struggled for 2 years to get a back seat, I think for a Buick Riviera, because the classic car guys didn't like what he did to the car. So no one would help him here. He had to try and source a seat from overseas and all this type of stuff. And it was just because some guys had issues because the car wasn't as, you know, down to the T as everybody said. But that brings you to another side. You've got the scale going between the RestoMods and the hardcore concourse classic guys as well.
Yeah.
Where that fight is coming on with what is an acceptable upgrade on a classic, especially when it comes to European and you know, European cars and this time, American cars, you know, as you know, anything goes.
Yeah.
Even though the question is coming there now, finding a matching number, Boss Mustang is becoming more rare than anything else because everyone's modified the hell out of them. So finding a matching number car is now becoming a big thing, and the matching number cars are now fetching huge prices in the US at the moment, completely unmolested cars. So there's constant. I know there was upsets with the Jag, especially in the Jag with the E-types, with guys doing upgrades that the Jag Club didn't want to see it's acceptable, but it's just to try and make the car more drivable. Put it that way, more enjoyable, more than anything else. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think in that respect, numbers matching cars shouldn't be the base for resto mods. I think there are enough. Yeah, then there are enough non-matching cars around, and especially in South Africa, to do something interesting with. But the numbers matching original cars, I think, would the best value retention staying stock. But having said that, I mean, the resto mods, especially for me in the European cars, are unbelievable. I mean, some of the best, combination of modern and classic technology, with your Singer Porsche or mechatronic Mercedes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying words that I'm loving. The Singer Porsches and stuff, and the upgrades that the guys are going for. And now in the UK, you've got this huge push about converting Porsches and classic cars over to electric, so guys can still enjoy them. I mean, there's a whole different wave that still hasn't even touched South Africa yet. I think that's still going to come.
It's already, yeah. I mean, there's about 3 clients already in Cape Town with VW buses that have got EV West drivetrains in.
Really?
Yeah, already. I mean, I found out.
Okay, well, I want to get one in the magazine, so you better hook me up on that one. Yeah.
I mean, I found out like by mistake again. I had a new storage client come in, and I said, "What cars have you got?" And he says, "Well, he's got a VW bus that he's got a EV West subframe in, So, and that was Cape Town.
What?
And then there's a Porsche being done. There's some really amazing stuff being done that we don't even know about. So yeah, I mean, we look on the internet, and it's all being done by EV West and the guys in California that have already bought the stuff and fitted to their cars locally.
But okay, so that gets me to the question. I mean, you've seen everything, and you've seen some of the coolest cars. You don't have to tell us who the owner. What was the most surprising car that you've ever seen that you did not think in your life you would ever see in South Africa, that just ended up sitting in someone's garage?
That example's happened quite recently. I mean, quite a lot of people know about it was Ferrari 5 and stuff. And it literally.
Sorry, you break up there. Just say that again. Ferrari, which one?
The 275.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was sitting in the guy's garage for 40 years.
What?
Yeah. And literally, yeah. He was quite a funny character, and he joked that it's always been a mystery, and the fact that he's kept it hidden has made it so interesting. But yeah, I mean, there are some crazy stories in South Africa still about what is sitting around.
I met a guy the one day, and we were talking, and he was telling me his family, he is sitting with Ferrari Dino number 2 in white.
Sure.
Second one off the floor, and then his family's got a 300 SL Gullwing, also in South Africa. Both cars are sitting in South Africa. It's part of the collection. But they've deregistered them. They said because so collectors aren't bugging them and people can't find out about them. But the cars are sitting in South Africa, and apparently they've been offered, because they've sent photos to Ferrari on the car and stuff, and they've been offered stupid money for it. But my thought process always sits is, you said, how did that even arrive here? You know, the whole process that here you've got gems that no one knew, and it's not even just sitting in the UK or, you know, in Spain or something. It's sitting in a little warehouse in a small town, and no one, you know, that no one thought about. That always blew my mind behind the car industry. You know?
Yeah, especially in South Africa, we always think these cars only exist internationally. You know, it's also, it parallels with history. A lot of our history in the 30s, like I'm part of a group of historians that dig around and for old photos and in history in South Africa. When you start going into the 20s and 30s and what was here, what could still be here, cars are here, and we look a bit more inward rather than always being, you know, to Europe and the States for these, because the South African story is interesting.
Yeah. Well, we always, years ago, I did a show with some great South African actors, and we were talking about how you can have, how cars can move through history, like Forrest Gump, if you want to put it this way. You know, you can have a car that came into the country in the 1940s, has moved through, have seen basically everything, as passed hands between doctors and farmers and everything, and play a massive role, and end up, you know, in a showroom like yourself, and people don't have no idea where it's and who's actually it belonged to. I mean, the example they used was, I think Nelson Mandela had a Chevy, 55 Chevy 210. And we're like, can you imagine the history? If that's now ending up in the Free State being hot rodded by, you know, some guy, and he doesn't know that the 210 he's driving used to be belonged to Nelson Mandela. It's amazing that something like that, something can move through history without no one noticing at all. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's the most interesting thing for me, since we started this business, because I mean, compared to selling new Ferraris, I now get a car and we ask more questions. So we say, how long have you owned the car? You know, have you got books? Have you got photos? Have you got this? And the documentation process of putting the package together just blows up. I mean, one of the cars we bought was the Bill Jennings Porsche, and we got a phone call from, and Bill Jennings, he was a South African racing driver. He built his own cars because he didn't have money to buy the coupe in the late 50s and early 60s. So she says, no, my dad's got this Formula One car, you know, out in Stanford. So we said, yeah, okay, fine. And there was also an E-Type, so we were really going there more for the E-Type. And we got there, and this we had to unpack a whole airplane hangar full of junk. The car was painted bright orange, and originally it was bare aluminium. And after asking around the Crank Kennel Club and, you know, some of the Killarney historic guys, you know, said, no, this is quite a significant car. Yeah. And when we bought Alpha engines, so I started digging around old photos, history, piecing it together, and I mean, a really amazing process. And Michelle owns the car now. She bugged us for that car for years and years and years because it's.
So I need to get Michelle onto the show. I love it to bits. Her and a small Porsche collection.
She's got this now, but the catch is with this Jennings Porsche is that it's supposed to have a 1500cc 4-cam Porsche engine, which costs at least a few million. Yeah. So we just took the decision. We're not going to, as a business, fund a couple of million for an engine. We really got way too many toys between aircraft engines and Morgan three-wheelers and all kinds of junk. So, you know, it's trying to focus a bit more on business. Yeah, we let that one go. But that was the start of this research on history. And the further back we went, it just completely blew my mind. I mean,
Well, no, keep going.
I'm from Kimberley originally, so I was doing research in the Art Derek Stewart Finley book, and I found out the first motor race in South Africa was held in Kimberley in 1934.
What?
I'm like, yeah. So I'm like digging around, and nobody even in Kimberley knew about it. And you know, Andre Loebscher wrote the Kyalami book. I asked him about it, and he's one of my main sources of information. And he says, yeah, he knows about it because he lives next door to the guy's son in Takai who actually won the race.
What?
Yeah.
That's a documentary just waiting to happen. I mean, look, I'm a stickler for it. The magazine I've got out at the moment, I'm busy with part 2. We actually did it a few years ago, because my thought was the same. Was when was the first? Oh, excuse me. When was the first hot rod ever in South Africa? And we always thought that it was like 1960s and started. It started out by early 50s. So we've actually got part 2 coming into it from the first generations and what they do. And it was the original Clarksdorp hill climb and how they started building the cars and stuff going. I've got photos and stuff, everything of it. It was amazing to see where it started. So your whole perspective of everything is just like, what? But I mean, where in Kimberley did this happen? I mean, is there no ways we can go back to the place and go create an event or something? I mean,
so this is like my rabbit hole. So I can go down.
I'm all on the blue pill on that one with you. Okay.
So you know where I don't know if you know Kimberley, but the airport and army base are on one side of town. There's a old fort called Alexander's Fontaine.
Yeah.
Now belongs to the military, so it pretty much it's a circular track, and I've even got race programs, I've got video, I've got old films. There were Bugattis that raced there were 8C Alfa Romeos owned by Bloemfontein car dealers. It's crazy.
So why don't I come? I'm coming to Cape Town in the next few weeks. I'm gonna come visit you.
Yeah.
We need to put the story together. We got to put the story together. We got to do a book or coffee book or just write. Somehow we got to put the story together. I mean, it's too. I mean, that's the start of racing in South Africa.
Yeah,
I mean, that is completely epic.
This trophy over here.
Yeah.
This is actually the first trophy ever awarded in a South African motor race. So when I went to go see Andre and the guy in Takai.
You're killing me.
I asked his wife and him, you know, you got any stuff? Like, are there any photos that Sonny did? And Adler, which was a small German sports car. And in the race, hit a letter of congratulations, you know, that he won the race in the German car. And she said, oh, you know, we'll have a look, but I think there's some old trophies in a army trunk in the garage.
Wow.
He was a grumpy old guy, and he says, no, it'll take me another 10 years just to unpack it. So, but she was quite interesting. Her dad was the dad again. He brought the first Bugattis into South Africa. He was a farmer in Natal, but she had a look for me. So I get this call from Andre, the neighbor, about 2 weeks later. She's found the trophies in the
what?
Yes. Yeah. So these are all these trophies that I got from.
Yeah. Now you just said brought the first Bugattis into the country. I mean, are those cars still here?
That car is still here. Yeah.
Oh, that must be something amazing to see.
Yeah, it was. Remember they had the Grand Prix, the classic Grand Prix
yes.
festival in London and at Belle de Vie at Mark organized. That car was there. It was part of the whole festival.
Can you imagine doing a lineup where you've got the first Ferrari ever in the country, the first Bugatti, the first Lambo, the first. I remember, I was about 7 or 8, I think around there, and there was a place in Boksburg called Auto G, and this is during the apartheid era, and Auto G used to assemble classic cars and supercars. So guys would ship cars in containers, but they would be stripped, and the cars would arrive, and a mechanic would actually arrive and stay there and assemble the car. Massive manual, and I'll never forget it. I can remember like yesterday. They had the cars lined up, and then there was just like sheets between the cars, but like actual sheets, not like anything fancy. And there was a white Countach. There was an Aston. I remember it was an Aston Martin that was there. I can't remember which one it was, but I remember the badges and stuff. And there was this white Countach, and that was the first time I ever saw a Countach in my life. And because we didn't, it blew my mind back then, because we didn't know that these cars are coming into the country. This is amazing. I mean, I remember there was an event at Kyalami, and I saw a Ferrari, F40 for the first time, and it was damaged. That was the thing that actually reminded me. The guy broke it. There was like damage on one of the fenders and stuff, but it was still there. And you're like, you would never believe in your life that you would actually see a Ferrari F40, and there one was. So it got me during the time period what actually came in that no one knew about. I mean, we're talking about the guy in Alberton that's got the McLaren F1. That he drives it every now and then and stuff. I mean, no one knew that there was a McLaren in the country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is, the other McLaren F1 is also owned by a South African, and it's the Le Mans winner. What? So the Le Mans winning McLaren is owned by a South African.
But I never forgot what Killarney, Harp Motorsport. I walked in there the one day, and they had one of the Le Mans Mazda rotaries race cars. It was actually one of I think they got it working again at one stage. And you're sitting there and you're like, oh, look, it's a replica. And they're like, no, it's the real car. I think it belongs to Johan Rupert or something. And you're like, what?
No, it was a private connector. He comes in with me a few mornings sometimes.
Oh, nice. I mean, that thing is just phenomenal.
And he owns, I mean, internationally, if you put a list together what South Africans own that are based in Europe.
Really?
That's also a very interesting list. Yeah. I mean, even, some very, very famous Group C cars. You got guys, collectors focusing in that side of the market. You got collectors focusing on this is what makes my job great. It's because you move between different brands, you move between different periods of history. And it's a big learning experience. But African stories, history, photos, we ask South Africans to submit their amateur video footage. There are boxes of film reels lying around in suitcases. Incidentally, when I found the footage on a Kimberley 100, at the end of that footage was the first Grand Prix circuit in Johannesburg, the Lord Howe circuit.
What?
Yeah, which was, where Birchmoors is now in just opposite Woodmead.
Yeah.
There's that housing estate. I think it's Kelvin.
Yes, I was actually there a few weeks ago. I drove through that area.
Yeah, so where Marlborough Road goes down, it's the M3 side, or the M3. That was where the first racetrack was, built by Lord Howe.
Yeah. That is absolutely crazy.
Again, there were Bugattis, Alfa Romeo these Maseratis. Yeah, so you know that's the side of this business that really is my interest.
I had Terry from Peterson Motor Museum on the show a while back, you know, from in the States, and we were talking about, you know, from someone like them. We obviously, I mean, they've got the museum. They've got like the Pope's car sitting next to Saddam Hussein's car, and you know, the level of stuff is just crazy. And I said, it must be amazing. It's such a weird world because you can have someone that picks up the phone and goes, well, I have, you know, some whatever person's first car sitting in my yard. You know, famous person, I've got Marilyn Monroe's first car from when she finished high school sitting in my yard. And you're like, whatever. But the weirdest thing is we've seen is these things are true. These things actually come out. I mean, we were talking, I think we mentioned the Bullet. A kid goes, my high school teacher has been driving the Mustang from the Bullet for the last 20 years as a daily driver. You go, oh, whatever. Seriously, you know, it's just the green Mustang, and it turns out it is Bullet. Yeah, you never know where these things are going to come from anymore, you know?
No, absolutely. But the thing that we've got to, you know, to verify all of this, you know, we hunt around for old photos and documentation, and you know, you start looking at old newspapers just to find parallel articles that could have been in that year. A car can, you know, so that for me, proving is a big you know, job, you know, especially with the older. Those are the ones that are the most interesting.
Exactly.
I'm actually gone from the free side to the brass and veteran side, you know, the pre-1905 cars. And there's a car sitting in the office. It's a 1904 Gladiator. This Gladiator, we've got photos from when it was found in 1910 by two Rondebosch schoolboys.
What?
And they've got the whole story. You know, it was written out, you know, a letter to the story in the 50s. This guy was already quite old, the schoolboy that found it in 1910. And that's been one of the amazing finds recently. But, you know, again, it's a hard car to sell in South Africa. It's for sale. You know, it's for sale at a reasonable price. But you've got to package this history to such a level that you're selling the story. The car is something you can enjoy, but it's a piece of history.
I might have someone that's interested in something like that, by the way. But only problem is they're not local. That's because that's the other thing. You want someone that's going, because you don't want there's two sides to it leaving. There's one side where a collector's going to buy it and he wants to put it in a room and he's the only person that's going to look at it. And then there's, you know, trying to get it into maybe a museum or something where it's going to be admired and the story is going to be there and it's going to live on more than anything else, you know?
You see, the owner would rather give it away to a museum than have it go overseas. I mean, it was the first car, I think, in the Piketberg area.
Yeah.
It had CDY1 was the reg number, but, you know, that's also a fine balance in the Crossley and Webb business. You know, we kind of create a bit of a museum atmosphere, but, you know, you've also got to be a business. But, you know, we try and...
No, basically, I've got the answer. We're going to have to do a Crossley Museum. All right? It's going to happen. Okay? You're leading towards it already. You know it's there. We're just going to have to put a Crossley Museum together to show the history of what actually is out there more than anything else, you know? Find the little pieces.
What is a museum in one world, you know, with media and, you know, communication methods and digital technology? You know, I find if we can scan this imagery in with the videos, you know, you could create a digital museum in a way.
That's true. That is true. That's true. But we'll talk. Maybe we can do something. We gotta talk, because look, I'm a stickler for history. I mean, especially the South African history. I'm in there. If there's anything we can put together, documentary, story, book, you name it, I'm in. You've got my attention immediately. Because I just think there's so many stories from a car perspective that can be told in South Africa that wasn't, just with cars that's ended up here, or where they started, and who actually are the guys that brought them in. It was just everything's a story. Thank you so much for taking the time with me. I'm in Cape Town in probably about a week or two. We are gonna have coffee. I'll come visit you. And you got it. I got to take a photo of that trophy. I mean, that is the most insane thing ever.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All right.
Okay. Good to chat.
Thanks for everything, and I'll speak to you when I'm in Cape Town in the next few weeks. All right.
Okay. I look forward to it.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.